Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the April 9th, 16th public forum, and it is really great to see so many people here with things to say. And so our first order of business, I will turn it over to you, Manager, to introduce.
Thank you, Mayor, and this is on the Public Passenger Vehicles and Transportation Network Companies item. And this is a public hearing to provide feedback on proposed changes to the city's public passenger vehicle code. The proposed code is likely to make it more likely for transportation network companies to operate in Eugene while continuing to maintain important community safety standards. And the council is tentatively scheduled to take action on April 23rd. If the proposed code is adopted, staff will update the administrative rules to include the specific requirements.
Thank you. So we have just 3 people. Oh, nope. We have 6 people to testify on this. Now let me just review the rules a little bit. Those wishing to speak during the public hearing must submit a completed request to speak form to the information desk prior to the beginning of the public hearing. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. You will have 3 minutes to comment. There are lights on the timer. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. And I'm wondering if we could have an extra chair on the side. So just to expedite throughout this, that I will call 2 names at a time, and the second person can sit in the chair near, so that the transition is as expeditious as possible. So our first speaker is Jay Mayernick, followed by Tracy Cook.
City Council, Mayor, my name is Jay Mayernick. I live in Eugene in Ward 7, and full disclosure, I'm the General Manager of Oregon Taxi. I'm here tonight to speak about the proposed amendments to Section 3.005 and 3.345 of the Eugene City Code regarding public passenger vehicles. Specifically, I'm here to discuss background checks, as it seems there's some discrepancy between what City Council discussed and voted on February 14th and what has been drafted and brought forward. During the February 14th work session, City Council was in agreement and steadfast that you would not be willing to budge or compromise on background checks. This sentiment is perhaps best captured by Councilwoman Syret, who said, "So what I hear you say is that proposed in terms of background check is the driver would be required to submit for a business license, and then we would conduct our background check, which would be the same as what we were doing for taxi drivers, correct?" It was confirmed. That's a very important baseline for me," she said. "I'm not willing to compromise on the background check piece." Unfortunately, the draft looks like just that, a compromise. And what has been proposed is not the same as what we do for taxi drivers. 3.345 subsection 2 of the drafted amendment reads, "An applicant may be issued a driver certification card without any waiting period if the person's application is complete and includes documentation demonstrating that the applicant has been hired by a vehicle for hire company after undergoing a criminal background check in accordance with the vehicle for hire company's criminal background check procedures." So on one hand, Council, you're saying that we're not willing to compromise on background checks, but on the other, we're putting language in our city code like in accordance with the vehicle for hire company's criminal background check procedures. Another theme that emerged from the February 14th work session was a desire to model our code after Medford's. Section 8335, titled Driver Requirements of Medford's Municipal Code, reads, "Prior to permitting a driver to operate as a driver and annually thereafter, the operator shall conduct or have a qualified third party conduct a criminal background check." The code goes on to outline the requirements of the third party background check, no doubt written to mirror Uber's background check process. There is nothing in the Medford Municipal Code that stipulates the municipality will conduct their own background check. Both myself and the company I represent recognize the public demand for TNCs in this evolving industry. However, the changes made to the city code in an attempt to lure them cannot be those pertaining to public safety, such as background checks. This much we agree on. One doesn't have to look far to find jarring and often tragic examples demonstrating the inadequacy of Uber's background check process. These examples are not anecdotal, they are widespread. As such, it is critical that the City of Eugene continues to conduct their own background check on all vehicle-for-hire drivers prior to that driver being given a certification card, and that any amendments made to the code reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Cook, followed by Aaron Baker.
Hi, Tracy Cook, live in Eugene, I think Ward 2, West Jefferson, I'm not sure. I'm also an Oregon taxi driver, and I was just looking over the, sorry if I seem flippant, I'm just kind of sick, I'm not dispassionate here, but I was looking over what you guys wrote, and there are like two things that I thought you might want to consider more. One was the allowing these vehicle-for-hire companies to get immediate certifications for their drivers. I'm the guy who's always said that Uber is all about insurance. Like, that's where you should really look, because I was shocked when I did my research 3 years ago, and 99% of Uber drivers were committing insurance fraud. And I was surprised that even though now they can get insured to work with Uber, according to what Uber drivers themselves say, only 40% of them are doing that, or 60% of them are still turned into criminals, technically, committing insurance fraud. So I think if you are going to allow these, if you're going to allow these quick certifications where I think you should also write in there that they have to provide documentation that they've gotten an insurance policy that works for them as rideshare, because realistically it's probably the only time you're going to be able to check that. And there's nothing to say, too, that as soon as they show you that they have a rideshare policy, they're not going to go out and cancel it and get a cheaper policy. But I just feel like it's an important thing to look at, and that's the time to do it when you could protect your people from putting themselves at risk. And then the other thing that I didn't see thought about, that I wondered if you guys thought about, was the airport. So if, just imagining there's a lot of rideshare and Uber going on, and then taxi industry shrinks to about like half of what it is. Well, according to the airport's policies, Uber can't go out there. I mean, they will. They'll go out there and pick people up on the curb, but that will be violating the airport's policy. And the airport does have their own kind of police or something. I've been approached by them. I'm not exactly sure what they are. But if they catch Uber drivers, then I mean, it just basically the rules that you have them as written to allow Uber to come back is going to create an illegal situation and a big problem out at the airport. And I was just thinking, you guys really might want to talk to them about what you could have going on to work with them and not create a whole situation, because every time a taxi goes out there, they have to go down Taxi Alley and pay $1, and there's this little magnetic thing that like beeps with a green light and makes sure that the dollar gets paid. Well, with Uber, they wouldn't drive down that Taxi Alley. They'd pick people up off the curb and create a back jam on the curb, and it would piss off the airport people, and they'd come out. And so, yeah, I think you should check for insurance right off the bat for those quick certifications and talk to the airport.
Thank you. Aaron Baker, followed by Ben Brooks.
Hello, Aaron Baker.
Yep.
Not sure it
Is
is.
it working?
Not sure that it is.
Why don't you, if you don't mind, just sit at that one. And
Let's see if I can hear myself better. Aaron Baker, live over near, I don't know what ward I'm in right now, but I was in Jennifer's ward and moved in a different ward now. Here in support for changing this ordinance to allow the possibility of ride shares to operate into this community. I think it is a very fair, it's written very fairly for both the taxi cab companies and the TNCs. And to address some of the issues already brought up, I think the background checks will be sufficient. And the airport issue, I think, can be, the airport will work that out. I do believe that the airport itself would want to change their rules and allow the TNCs there. So thanks for getting it this far. And I think the other changes coming more from the city manager's office. I don't think we should tax the drivers. I've heard the ideas of taxing the drivers after they make a certain amount. I don't think we should tax their labor for working hard. I think it is a hard job. But other than that, in support of the ordinance as it stands now and to get this moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Ben Brooks? Ben Brooks? No? How about Robbie Freer? No? Okay. How about Charles Brooks? Okay. I think we may be done with public testimony on the TNC. Okay. Council want to make, I guess I'll close the public hearing officially, and councilors, any comments, questions for follow-up? Okay. Are we ready to roll, manager, for round 2?
We are.
Good, thank you.
This is a public hearing on ordinances concerning secondary dwellings and housing on church, synagogue, and temple property, and Alyssa Hanson will give a brief overview before the public hearing portion.
Right. Good evening. Just wanted to give you a brief overview, as the city manager mentioned. So as you know, we're here tonight to talk about or implement the implementation of Senate Bill 1051 as it relates to secondary dwellings. This is legislation that was passed in 2017 at the state level and became effective this past August. What's pertinent to tonight is really the provision related to accessory dwelling units, which we call secondary dwelling units here in Eugene. The legislation itself addressed a number of things related to housing affordability, but tonight we are just talking about secondary dwellings. You have for you in front of you in the agenda item summary what the specific provision states related to secondary dwellings. And as you know, housing affordability is a big issue in our community. You've been having many conversations, work sessions. I'm sure you've been hearing about it from your constituents, seeing it in the newspaper. There's been a lot of community energy around it as well. And at the same time, maintaining livability while providing for this housing affordability, we know that's a widely shared value in Eugene as well. So to implement Senate Bill 1051 in a way that was both responsible and responsive to the variety of interests, staff had recommended a phased approach. And in January, you voted to initiate a phased approach to the land use code amendments. Tonight's public hearing is on phase 1, which addresses where secondary dwellings are permitted in the city. The existing standards for heights, setbacks, et cetera, building size are proposed to remain in place at this time. Phase 2 is proposed to begin following the adoption of phase 1 and would consist of a review and potential update of our existing development standards for secondary dwellings. And this would happen through an inclusive community process, and that's what you directed. And this allows for those emerging community conversations around housing affordability and neighborhood livability to inform those potential changes. So just really briefly, the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing in early March and heard a broad range of perspectives, everything from you need to change basically everything in your secondary dwelling standards in order to comply with Senate Bill 1051, all the way to you don't need to change anything in your secondary dwelling provisions to comply with Senate Bill 1051. We did hear, a majority of folks definitely support secondary dwellings and providing for housing affordability, and making it easier to allow for secondary dwellings. We also heard from housing advocates and other folks who requested that the Planning Commission find ways to make it easier to provide affordable housing on lands associated with churches and other places of worship. That will come up in just a second. The Planning Commission also left the record open for an additional week, received even more testimony, kind of the same broad range of perspectives. And at the end of March, they made their recommendation. And their recommendation is actually what you see in the 3 ordinances before you tonight. They voted to recommend approval of land use code amendments that addressed where secondary dwellings are permitted. There's one slight modification to that, and I'll address that in just a second. They voted to recommend to change the definition of secondary dwellings to be consistent with what's provided in Senate Bill 1051. And they also voted to recommend a provision to allow for affordable housing on church property, actually to specifically allow 2 affordable home houses on church property. And they voted to recommend that City Council allocate resources and prioritize Phase 2 immediately following the adoption of Phase 1. I just want to take a minute to address staff's role in this process. I'm really here to assist the Planning Commission and the City Council in the process. I know maybe there was some concern about what was included in the packet for the Planning Commission, and I think there was concerns that perhaps staff went rogue on what was provided in there. And what I want to just mention is that those were really addressing the testimony that the Planning Commission heard and the questions that Planning Commission asked. So it was really intended to be responsive to the testimony. It was not intended to jump to the next phase. Just thought it was important to clear that air. Staff's also, we're also responsible for making sure that the legal deadlines are met. And in this case, we had to get the ordinance out the next day or 2. And so if Planning Commission had been recommending, further changes, it was important that we had a head start on those. And my role is also to serve as a contact for interested parties. And so also always just ask if anybody has any questions about intent, to feel free to contact me. So in terms of the 3 ordinances, the first ordinance before you adds secondary dwellings as a permitted use in 7 additional zones. It also clarifies that secondary dwellings are not accessory buildings. And then with one exception, there are no changes to the development standards, meaning there are no changes to the current standards that apply to secondary dwellings. The one exception is kind of a funky one, and it's really I think it's more of a housekeeping, and this is something that the Planning Commission recommended. What they recommended is that in the Royal Node, which is a special area zone out in West Eugene, there's a sub-area there where the building height for secondary dwellings and accessory dwellings was exactly the same, and it was 50 feet. However, secondary dwellings are also limited to 800 square feet in area. So try to imagine a 5-story, 800 square foot building. So Planning Commission took it upon themselves to recommend that be lowered to 25, which was the height allowed in the other sub area. So hopefully you don't think that one's too crazy. Otherwise, there's no changes to the development standards. The second ordinance, the Planning Commission recommendation, as I mentioned, is to align the definition of secondary dwelling with the definition of accessory dwelling provided in Senate Bill 1051. And then the third ordinance is also a recommendation of the Planning Commission based on a fair amount of testimony they heard that would allow for churches and other places of worship to have 2 dwellings on their property to provide for subsidized housing. These would be limited in size. As proposed, they'd be limited to 800 square feet in size. It couldn't be any taller than 18 feet. I was going to say 1,800, and then that would just kind of messed up the other one, didn't it? And then they couldn't exceed maximum density. This would be a simple fix for the current situation in the R1 zone where a church could have 1 dwelling, or they could have 3 or more. But the way it works out, because they can't have an accessory dwelling, they can't have 2 dwellings currently. So that's intended to fix that. Just next steps, you are scheduled for action on May 14th. And July 1st, again, is the deadline to implement Senate Bill 1051 in regards to secondary dwellings. And just as a procedural matter, since you received the packet, gotten 34 pieces of email that I'm aware of. Some of them went to you, some of them went to me, some of them went to both of us, so I'm making sure I have them all, but I'll make sure that these are in your binder and that you'll get a link to these and anything that comes in tonight as well. And that's all I have. I'll be available for questions later.
Great, thank you very much for that summary. And so I'm ready to open the hearing. Just a reminder that if you've signed up, you can speak, and I have 56 people signed up. So request that if you don't need to use the 3 minutes, we will welcome that, a shorter presentation, so everybody has a chance to speak, but I'm not going to cut it off. Everybody gets 3 minutes if you need 3 minutes. And the second person that I'll call 2 names at a time, and the second person should be in position there. Oops, someone's taking the chair away. We may have to, oh, thank you so much.
Well done.
Excellent,
Well done.
excellent. That's an engaged community. And please give your name, your city of residence, if you're Eugene, your ward, and then follow the lights on the timer. I think you're probably all familiar with that. So the first up is John Borofsky, followed by David Monk.
Thank you. Madam Mayor and City Councilors, my name is John Borofsky. I live in Ward 3, and I'm the current chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. I'm here to speak to you on the implementation of Senate Bill 1051. The Eugene Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter on March 6th. A total of 20 people testified at the public hearing and provided a broad range of perspective in person as well as in written testimony. Subsequently, we held a meeting on March 26th to deliberate and forward a recommendation to you, the City Council. That recommendation is provided in your AIS for this evening. The Commission heard a various range of opinions on how to be compliant with Senate Bill 1051 before coming up with the recommendations before you tonight. We also took into consideration the council motion that directed staff to take a phased approach to the issue. We felt that it would be appropriate for you to examine the changes we proposed for the church properties. Finally, the Planning Commission voted to recommend that the City Council allocate resources and prioritize Phase 2 immediately after the adoption of Phase 1. That was an important part to us. We know that there's a lot of things that planning and development have been tasked from you and from our community in the last few months. And it's pretty important. As you can see, there's a lot of people here that are here to talk about this. And resources are going to be one of the things that's going to be challenging here to try and get this all done. So that was one of our important things. And the other thing that it's interesting, just since I've got a minute to talk to you about the Planning Commission's role. When Alyssa talked about the very special thing in the Royal Avenue node that is a problem with the code, that's the kind of stuff that we dig into for you guys. We're going through those codes and looking and saying, well, the height here doesn't work on an 800 square foot thing, so you guys don't have to. So that's kind of the stuff, some of the weeds that we get into in helping you guys to make a recommendation for changing and doing codes. So with that, I'll let you listen to the other 56 people.
Thank you. David Monk.
55.
David Monk, followed by Margie James.
Mayor, councilors, my name is David Monk. I'm a Eugene resident of Ward 2, and I'm the current board chair of Southeast Neighborhood Association. This public hearing testimony is on behalf of the neighborhood's board of directors. We are solely supportive of housing options, you can rest assured. We fully acknowledge that our community's lack of housing for low and very low income residents and recognize the difficulty of building affordable housing in today's inflated real estate market. We stand ready to work with city staff and with council to find solutions to these pressing problems. This is why members of the NLC, as members of the NLC, we requested that you initiate a neighborhood-based planning process. We believe that is only through this kind of inclusive process that the city can hope for the public buy-in necessary to truly address our need for low-income and affordable housing. That being said, we reject the claims of Thousand Friends of Oregon and the Home Builders Association that Eugene's current standards for SDUs are not in not in compliance with Senate Bill 1051. The relevant language from that legislation for the purposes of this public hearing is that Eugene shall allow at least one accessory dwelling unit for each detached single-family dwelling, subject to reasonable local regulations relating to siting and design. If the council determines there is merit to claims that a review of the SDU standards are warranted, we ask that you direct staff to initiate a planning process that includes neighborhood associations, as well as special interest groups like Thousand Friends and Home Builders Association. Together, we can assess the soundness of current standards and determine the need for possible changes. By initiating this process for a review of our SDU standards, the council will be establishing an inclusive process that will serve us all well as we endeavor to tackle the more difficult issues with providing accessible, affordable housing to those in our community who are burdened by housing costs. If every neighborhood has its own unique characteristics and opportunities for infill and dense development. We want to be partners in facilitating the kind of dialogue needed to identify the opportunities and develop buy-in from those who would be impacted by the development. Without our active participation, we fear for the livability of our neighborhoods. Please acknowledge the contribution that we make, or rather that we can make, to this undertaking and direct staff to move forward with the neighborhood-based planning process at the earliest possible date. Southeast Neighbors asks that you not change SDU standards in regards to R2, R3, and R4 zones until an appropriate process has commenced. Thank you.
Thank you. Margie James, followed by Ted Koopman.
My name is Margie James. I live in Eugene, but I'm speaking as the co-chair of Friendly Area Neighbors, which is a neighborhood association whose boundaries are within Ward 1 and 2, representing approximately 3,500 households. The FAN board voted unanimously to support the letter sent to Mayor and Council on April 9th, requesting that the SDU ordinances go back to the drawing board for greater community participation, including involvement of neighborhood associations. This is about process, not about housing needs. State Planning Goal 1 requires a broad cross-section of citizens to be involved in all phases of the planning process. Eugene's Neighborhood Recognition Policy, Section 2A, notes that neighborhood organizations will be advisory to City Council, Planning Commission, and other boards and commissions on matters affecting their neighborhoods. Neighborhood associations and citizens at large need to be a part of the discussions on SDUs. Housing affordability is a strong component of Senate Bill 1051. There is no data backing up the premise that the ordinances under discussion in Eugene right now will provide this defined affordability, nor that future SDUs will supply that need of affordable housing. More affordable is not synonymous with affordable. 1051 defines affordability as less than 60% of median family income. So Eugene already has SDUs allows SDUs on properties with single-family homes. What we need is data about current number of SDU units. What gets in the way of building more, and how can we make them part of the answer to our housing crisis? Numbers of certain types of units and affordability. This discussion needs to be data-driven. City of Eugene needs a comprehensive plan addressing housing affordability and shelter types based on solid data. This will require the involvement of a broad cross-section of our citizens with strong involvement of our neighborhood organizations, along with City Council and city staff. We need to create a plan that is acceptable to that broad cross-section of our citizens, and that means an inclusionary planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ted Koopman, followed by Pam Woodell.
Greetings. My name is Ted Koopman, and I'm the elected chair of Jefferson Westside Neighbors, a chartered city neighborhood association representing 4,800 residents in Ward 1. We ask the council to abide by State Planning Goal 1 by involving a cross-section of affected citizens in all phases of the planning process, as well as Eugene Neighborhood Organization Recognition Policy, which mandates that we advise the Council and Planning Commission on matters affecting our respective neighborhoods. As these standards have not been met, we ask that the city step back from any decision on SDUs until the letter and spirit of public participation required by state and local planning guidelines have achieved. A couple of meetings is just not going to cut it. The SDU discussion is only the start of a much-needed deliberation on housing and cannot be addressed outside the context of that broader discussion. We lack the needed data on SDUs, not knowing if the issue is zoning, owner interest, or cost. To move forward without the needed data would be like throwing up a fence, dumping a load of gravel, and expecting a city hall to emerge. We propose a neighborhood-based, transparent, I knew Mark would like that. We propose a neighborhood-based, transparent, and inclusive public process to comprehensively address our housing needs, an idea that garnered unanimous support in the Neighborhood Leaders Council. We know this works because Jefferson West Side neighbors twice engaged in such a process in our special area zones. The result is the most walkable neighborhood and a robust mix of missing middle housing in Eugene, including secondary dwelling units. Our process earned overwhelming city approval and found creative solutions missed by planning staff, such as alley access housing. That is the power of a real public process. Still, our solutions work for us, but perhaps not for other neighborhoods, and that is really the point. Different neighborhoods have different challenges that a one-size-fits-no-one approach really can't address. People don't so much buy houses as they do neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is unique. I looked for my house for over 2 years and my neighbor for much longer because we wanted to live in Jefferson West Side. A house or apartment isn't an interchangeable widget, it's a home. We can only achieve better housing together if we acknowledge that planning is something that should be done with the public and not simply to the public. Neighborhood associations are mandated to advise the city on matters affecting our neighborhoods, and no matters affect neighborhoods more than the one before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Woodell, followed by Code Champ. Or,
I was one of three.
well, I have them in order, so
Well, see, what we had, okay. I'm Pam Waddell. I'm the co-chair of Friendly Area Neighbors, and I am reading 1/3 of a letter. We split into 2-minute sections. So the second was Dennis Hebert.
okay.
Third is Rachel.
I've got Dennis,
Okay.
so maybe
All right.
Code can
Okay,
wait.
I'm just reading a letter that was voted on by 6 or 7 different neighborhood associations, boards, and we sent to you on April 8th, and this is an updated version. Dear Mayor, City Council, and City Manager, the duly elected boards of Amazon Neighbors Association, Churchill Area Neighbors, Friendly Area Neighbors, Jefferson Westside Neighbors, Laurel Hill Valley Citizens, Southeast Neighbors, Southwest Hills Neighbors Association, South University Neighbors Association, representing over 60,000 citizens of Eugene across 5 wards, are alarmed at the pace and trajectory of the current process around Senate Bill 1051 compliance. We are concerned about the precedent it may set for future discussions on zoning modifications. Any decision that directly impacts tens of thousands of people and hundreds of millions of dollars of property should not be decided by a few city staff and special interest groups and developers. Planning is something that should be done with the public and the neighborhood associations. We interact with our constituents every day and have children, grandchildren, family, friends, and employees who hope to be able to eventually own a home or at least afford one. We know Eugene's current approach to housing is unsustainable, and we need to develop strategies to provide different types of shelter that people can afford and that they want to live in. We must take action, but whatever we do must be based on data, evidence of any plan's efficacy, and any potential impacts. So far, we have seen little data or evidence of efficacy, and certainly no real discussion of any impacts. We want to be part of this.
So is this Dennis Hebert? Okay, good. So your
Ms. Hebert.
continuity,
Ms.
great.
Taylor's ward. I'm also on the Southeast Neighbors Board. Pursuant to State Planning Goal 1, which calls for involving a cross-section of affected citizens in all phases of the planning process, and in light of overwhelming support in the Neighborhood Leaders Council, under no circumstances should any revisions to the R1, R2 zoning be contemplated until after a robust neighborhood-based public discussion. Your neighbors have invested most of their means on their homes and dedicated decades of their lives and identities in these communities with a reasonable expectation that their single-family dwelling zone neighborhoods would remain as such. It would be both unethical and undemocratic to not consult those who would bear the brunt of any changes to R1 and R2. Several neighborhoods have invested countless hours in community process to develop special area zones that guide development. It is our consensus that the city cannot make wholesale changes to code that abrogate the intent of special area zones and how development is conducted on the ground without embarking on a commensurate process to revisit these community forums. That is, provided that the relevant neighborhood associations decide to revisit that process.
Okay, Rachel Latimer, followed by the Raging Grannies.
Hi. Rachel Latimer, Eugene. I reside in Ward 3. I represent Amazon Neighbors. I'm the co-chair. The third part of this letter. Therefore, we demand that the city halt any moves to change current residential zoning and initiate discussions exclusively between city councilors, city staff, and neighborhood associations in creating a neighborhood-based, inclusive, and democratic process that comprehensively addresses Eugene's pressing housing needs. It is only through a process that recognizes the unique affordances, challenges, and opportunities of each neighborhood that we can have a chance at a viable strategy to address Eugene's housing challenges now and in the future. Only through public buy-in can we hope to provide the stability and predictability that homeowners, renters, and developers need to plan for the future. Through an inclusive process, we can systemically and comprehensively address our housing challenges and avoid endlessly relitigating each change to land use policy. Neighborhood association boards are the elected representatives of their respective neighborhoods and act as the interface between citizens and what is often an incomprehensible and intimidating city bureaucracy. We are charged with handling public meetings for planned development and frequently provide a forum where city staff and elected officials can brief and interact with the public. When planning or zoning changes are considered, neighborhood associations are the proper venue. Join us in our faith in democracy and the belief that together with our fellow citizens we can craft informed decisions to address our collective challenges. This letter is the product of a multi-week discussion and endorsed by the following neighborhood associations via votes from their boards who were able to deliberate by April 8th. The initial signatories thought that council having this letter prior to the April 9th meeting would assist in the planned discussion of local options for affordable housing. As more neighborhood association boards have a chance to meet over the course of the month, an updated letter will be submitted. Signed, Amazon Neighbors Association, Friendly Area Neighbors, Jefferson Westside Neighbors, Laurel Hill Valley Citizens, Southeast Neighbors, Southwest Hills Neighbors Association, South University Neighbors Association, and signed by Churchill Area Neighbors in agreement to the sentiment of the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Raging Grannies, followed by Reverend Nancy Gallagher.
My name is Pepe Berriger, and I live in Claire Surratt's ward. The Raging Grannies would like to say we support more affordable dwellings in order to diminish the number of people who must live on the streets.
These streets are our streets, these streets are my streets, Broadway, Willamette, and even High Streets. These parks are our parks, not just for some folks. Eugene was made for you and me. As I was walking one day down Broadway, a poor old woman was coming my way. She looked downtrodden, her cart was loaded, and this is what she said to me. I did not want this, I did not plan this, but I am homeless and on the bad list. People despise me, they treat me badly. a tiny house would do for me. I want a safe place to lay my head down, but there is no place for me to bed down. If I had power, I'd try to change things so these streets would be the same for all. So listen, counselors, we need to act well. Folks need a safe place and not a jail cell. Let's work together to make it happen. These streets were made for you and me. These streets were made for you and me.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Nancy Gallagher, followed by Paul Neville.
My name is Nancy Gallagher, and I'm the rector of St. John the Divine in Springfield. I live in Eugene in Ward 6. Our little community, it's a very modest community in Springfield. Our average Sunday attendance, and that's how you judge the size of churches, we all know it by heart, is 30. We currently are helping 8 people with housing on our property in conjunction with the St. Vincent de Paul Conestoga program and the car camping parking lot program. These, for our experience, these are on our parking lot. I mean, this is area that I wish we had filled up every day of the week, but in fact we don't. So this land is not being used well until we got these people on there. Most of the people that I come in contact with are people that are older, 50, 60, and the oldest person that's in our program right now is a woman with dementia who's 85 years old and lives in her van with her daughter who takes care of her. Everybody that's on my property has one major barrier to housing, and that's income. Most property managers would like for you to have 2.5 times the rent as income. And most of the people that I come in contact either have minimal SSI, which is about $750 a month, or they're a couple and they both have minimal Social Security benefits or SSI. So at $750 a month, you can afford $300 a month in rent. Currently, I haven't been able to find anything good or bad at that rate. And if you're a couple, that means you have about $1,500 a month, which means you can afford $600 a month. And we did find, one couple I'm working with, we did find one property, but I think it should be condemned. I mean, it did not look, I wouldn't put my dog in there. It was very, very difficult. So I just ask that you allow churches, which are already impacting their neighborhood and already providing food pantries and housing and clothing to this population already, likely, I know ours does, they will be able to do just a little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul Neville, followed by Carolyn Jacobs.
Hello, my name is Paul Neville, and I live in Ward 5. And I'm here tonight as the Director of Public Relations and Grants for the St. Vincent de Paul Society of Lane County. And I'm here to comment on Senate Bill 1051 and the critically important role that faith communities in Eugene can play to help address our growing housing crisis. Last year, First Congregational Church approached St. Vincent de Paul with a proposal to put 2 small residential units on its property to house families with children for up to 2 years as they transitioned, with the assistance of St. Vincent de Paul's Connections program, into stable, permanent housing. Now, the Connections program, as some of you may be aware, is a real gem of a program that for more than 2 decades has had great success in helping families to successfully make this transition. The key to the program's success is intensive casework tailored to meet each family's needs. We have a 93% success rate with people who are in the program. And we give them programs ranging from rental rehabilitation to fiscal management to substance abuse treatment to parenting skills. And it's a program that's proven, and it's a program that works. And it turned out that First Congregational's innovative proposal didn't comply with city code. And that was disappointing to First Congregational and to the many neighbors who supported the church's proposal, and to St. Vincent de Paul in the Connections program, which needs the transitional housing it would have provided. Now, First Congregational's concept has been given new life by the state legislature's passage of Senate Bill 1051, which, among other things, removes barriers to the development of affordable housing by faith communities such as First Congregational. So St. Vincent de Paul urges the City Council to carefully consider code revisions that would make it easier for faith communities that have available and suitable land to create new transitional housing. For decades, Eugene's faith communities have led the way in fighting homelessness by opening their buildings to the Interfaith Night Shelter, Egan Warming Centers, and other programs. Faith communities are uniquely equipped to provide not only housing, but the support, resources, community, and love that make it possible for homeless families to become whole, housed, and happy citizens in this community. So I urge you to give deliberate but timely and serious consideration to providing an affordable and accessible way for places of worship to provide additional affordable housing. St. Vincent de Paul stands willing and ready to work arm in arm with faith communities to provide the management and casework that are essential to helping families complete that arduous but very achievable. Believe me, I've seen families succeed over and over again at St. Vincent de Paul and other nonprofits in this town. Help them complete that journey from homelessness to permanent housing.
Thank you. Carolyn Jacobs, followed by Reverend Melanie Uman.
Carolyn Jacobs, Ward 3. I'm also a South University Neighborhood Board person and a member of the Neighborhood Leaders Council. Despite a severe housing shortage and a lack of lower income affordable housing, nothing leads one to conclude that adding SDUs to R2, 3, and 4 will alleviate these conditions. In these zones, it's already legal to build a second unit. The code standards for R1 SDUs are more restrictive than for second units in R2, 3, and 4. No one would choose to build an SDU in a zone where they can already build a second unit with more relaxed standards and with much greater flexibility. I would urge you to immediately determine whether R3 and 4 actually permit new single-family units due to their inability to meet minimum density standards. This is critically important because SB 1051 only applies to zones which permit single-family detached dwellings. To increase density, it would be much more effective to quickly enact code changes prohibiting single-family dwellings in R3 and 4, which would leave us in compliance with SB 1051 and make much better use of R3 and R4. Looking forward, we need, as other people have already said, an inclusive and transparent process to evaluate our current situations and to produce a nuanced set of standards meeting the varying needs of all areas of the city. And remember, state planning goal number 1 is a requirement for community involvement. And as someone said, but it's worth repeating, Section 2 of the Neighborhood Organization Recognition Policy, known as NORP, entitled Function and Responsibilities of Neighborhood Organizations states, quote, neighborhood organizations will be advisory to the City Council, the Planning Commission, and other city boards, commissions, and officials on matters affecting their neighborhoods. We're ready to engage you in this process, and we need to begin. To conclude, the results of Phase 1 will be at best trivial in the effort to mitigate our housing shortage. A rush into Phase 2 and a rushed Phase 2 process is irresponsible and unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Melanie Uman, followed by Bill Aspegren.
Hi, my name is the Reverend Melanie Uman, and I serve as one of the pastors at First Congregational United Church of Christ on the corner of 24th and Harris. That is in Ward 3, and I am a resident in Ward 1. And I'd like to invite, unfortunately we didn't prepare a song, but anyone who is here representing places of worship or in support of the proposal regarding places of worship, if you'd be willing to stand.
Oh.
As Paul indicated 18 months ago, we went to St. Vincent de Paul with a proposal to provide transitional housing. You can sit down now if you like, unless you want to sing, but. As Paul laid out, I won't repeat what he said, but this conversation has been exciting and disappointing. Everyone we have talked to has been enthusiastic about this proposal to site housing on our church property. Neighbors, city staff, and elected officials, certainly our congregation and other congregations around the city that are enthusiastic about opportunities that might open up should this be changed. In our neighborhood, low-income families could have access to so many amenities, excellent schools, University Park, the YMCA, wonderful neighbors, as well as the support and resources of our vibrant church family. What we still believe is an amazing idea has been stalled due to the complication of city codes. As it stands right now, there's no way for us to do this. In the many conversations we've engaged about this proposal, a strong common thread in and through it all is the pervasive frustration across the board with housing codes that are outdated and create unnecessary obstacles. Despite the incredible efforts of the people of this city, and they have been incredible, we are seen as a model for so many communities around the country. Despite all of our efforts of creativity, the crisis of affordable housing in Eugene is worse, not better. Our neighbors are losing their childhoods, their health, their thriving, their lives for lack of affordable housing. This is our moment to eliminate the barriers that limit responsible solutions. Thanks to the mandate of Senate Bill 1051 and this community asking for change, you are in a strong position to craft policy and practices that serve a higher purpose of thriving for all of our community members. Communities of faith are a tremendous resource. We care deeply, we do a lot with a little, and we are completely invested in making this community rise to its highest values of inclusion and justice. So I encourage you to support the Planning Commission's proposal regarding places of worship. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bill Aspegren, followed by Carmel Snyder.
Good evening. I'm Bill Aspegren. I live in Eugene in Ward 3 on the Zelinka's ward. I'm co-chairman and treasurer of the South University Neighborhood Association. And before I say anything else, I'd like you to leave the record open for at least 1 week, preferably 2 weeks, so that we can respond to some of the testimony. And I'm only going to comment about phase 1 of this. Eugene fully complies with Senate Bill 1051. Right now, no changes are needed. Fact 1, no evidence has been produced by the legal, planning staff, or the Planning Commission that demonstrates Eugene does not comply with Senate Bill 1051. Fact, new single-family homes in R3 and R4 are not legally permitted based on the code, due to the minimum lot size requirement not meeting minimum density standards. Therefore, R3 and R4 are not zoned for detached single-family dwellings and are not covered by Senate Bill 1051. I've got more detail on this in that first page I gave you. Another fact, given current SDU standards, there are over 30,000 lots, R1 lots, in Eugene that are large enough to support an SDU. we're not lacking for places to put SDUs. We aren't getting that many, but whatever. Fact, SDUs are an inefficient and expensive way to increase density and solve affordability housing problems. Development of downtown and transit corridor apartments is more efficient and part of the Envision Eugene long-range plan. Fact, the public process for this project has significant flaws. There was improper notification to DLCD. The Planning Commission sent code changes to council that were not presented to the public until after the record was closed for comments. These are serious matters and can lead to an appeal. I think we need to rectify things like this. So what do we need to do? Recommendations: slow down and initiate a comprehensive plan to deal with Eugene's housing problems, one that is driven by inclusive community participation and based on facts and evidence. Recommendation: initiate a priority project to help First Congregational Church put 2 small houses on their property, but follow the proper public process. And then last, please read my written testimony starting at page 399 of the 443 pages of testimony you received already, not including what additionally came. I actually gave you a copy of my written testimony because you'll probably glaze over by the time you get to 399 page. Thank you.
Thank you. Carmel Snyder, followed by Kelly Johnson.
Madam Mayor and City Councilors, my name is Carmel Snyder. I am here representing AARP. We have more than 500,000 members across the state of Oregon. 128,000 of those reside here in Lane County, mostly Eugene. And I also am here to represent neighbors, because just like everybody else in this chamber, we are all neighbors. We all belong to neighborhoods, and we care about the neighborhoods that we live in. We submitted a letter in support of SB 1051, which required local action to comply with this law by July 1st, 2018. So I'm here today to urge the City Council to comply with state law and demonstrate our community's commitment to affordability and diversity, to age-friendly, inclusive housing, and fully implement SB 1051 now, and not in 2 stages, but since you look like you're going to do it in 2 stages, to do it by July 1st. We support efforts to remove barriers for quality infill development and to housing options for older residents and all families in Eugene by actively encouraging missing middle and other affordable housing types. We know that ADUs are not the solution to the affordable housing crisis in Eugene, but research tells us that 90% of people age 65 and older want to remain in their homes and in their communities as they get older. And we support the use of accessory dwelling units because our research shows that it allows people to stay in their home longer. They can use that as extra income in order to be able to afford to stay in their homes, or they can move into that dwelling themselves or have a caregiver live in that home. So it makes sense as the population ages. According to the National Association of Realtors, the Eugene area is the 2nd most constrained housing market in the nation, second only to Seattle, Washington, and nearly half of our community is cost burdened by the price of housing. A high percentage of those are older residents, renters, and homeowners, and this burden only increases with age. In addition, for older adults and persons with disabilities looking to own or rent a home, there are just not enough affordable or market rate options that would allow them to downsize yet to stay in their neighborhoods. For older adults, the loss of a home can mean the loss of community ties, displacement, and even premature and unnecessary costly institutionalization on taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. Kelly Johnson, followed by Carlos Nixon.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Kelly Johnson. I live in Eugene in Ward 4. I work at Shelter Care, a local nonprofit that helps unhoused and vulnerable community members access safe housing. Every day, I see the impact of our city's housing crisis. Having a safe place to live is vital to a thriving community. And there are far too many people in our community that struggle to get or maintain this basic need. The Eviction Lab at Princeton University has built the first nationwide database of evictions. Data from 2016 shows that in Eugene, the average rent burden, or the percentage of household income spent on rent, is close to 40%. The Department of Housing and Urban Development finds that families who pay more than 30% of their income on housing costs may have difficulty affording other necessities such as food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. I know that there is not a single sweeping solution to this problem, but I believe multiple solutions need to be attempted. One such possibility is to expand the types of housing available in our community to meet this growing need. As an organization and partner in the Better Housing Together effort, we encourage City Council to recognize that our community needs smaller and more affordable housing options for all residents, all ages, and income levels now. I hope that Council take the necessary steps to encourage missing middle and more affordable housing types like secondary dwelling units. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos Nixon, followed by Ralph McDonald.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Nixon. I live at 1556 Wilson Court between City View and Oak Patch. I'm framing my remarks tonight as a response primarily to the article in yesterday's Register Guard by the We Can group. This makes my comments a little more general and philosophical. My goal is perhaps to try and reduce some of the polarization that sometimes seems to emanate from those who present themselves as opposed to barriers to SDUs. As it turns out, I should add, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the authors in the line tonight, and they explained more about the article's intended meaning. But I will start by responding to the article as it came across to me and come back to some of what I learned later. To me, this article comes across as taking what I would call a mother pie and apple hood approach, namely that it presents an issue in such a way that no one can disagree and call themselves a nice person. The pivotal sentence for me was addressing Eugene's housing crisis by removing barriers to critically needed housing opportunities. This is a very absolute but very vague sentence. What barriers is, I think, a question that is important here. The implication is if you want barriers, you're against housing for all and for decimating farmland and forest land, and it sort of made me almost feel like, is this a group front for developers? Do we want SDUs? Of course we do. Is some opposition self-interest, as the article suggests? This, to me, is a regularly occurring polarizing phrase. No, it's not self-interest, or yes, actually it is, but not in a narrow sense. If you want a livable community, you want some barriers to SDUs. You don't want a barrierless situation. What the article tends to imply is that barriers are bad, only bad. We should want barriers. The question is, what kind of SDU is appropriate? What kind of barriers are sensible? We'd like to avoid the monolithic things visible looming in backyards in some parts of Eugene, and having insufficient barriers can create instant ghettos. The question then is what barriers? Some examples of things that we as a community might like to see are stipulations about a portion of non-parking green space. Some stipulations about relative height and relative closeness, not blocking somebody's access to sunshine. There are two things mentioned specifically in the article that I thought were interesting. One was the idea of converting existing second floors, which seems sensible. But I had some questions about the idea of owner occupancy, which I thought, whoa, okay. So that's the gist.
Thank you. Thank you. Ralph McDonald, followed by Todd Boyle.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm a member of the Sustainability Commission and co-chair of the Southwest Hills Eugene Neighborhood Association. I'm speaking tonight as an individual. Our Sheena Neighborhood Association defends and loves the character, livability, natural areas, and wildlife of our beautiful neighborhood. But we also support affordable housing, and we're not against all changes in housing. Our Sheena neighborhood was a catalyst for the development of the St. Vincent de Paul Youth House on Willamette Street, and we've been a supporter of that endeavor. I wanted to touch base tonight on some points of a Sustainability Commission letter that was delivered to Council on March 3rd. First, and I didn't have a chance a month ago to read the full letter. First, we recommend that staff prepare quick, easy, and effective code modifications that would allow places of worship, you know the issue here, First Congregational Church. We would like to see it done before Armageddon. I'm not sure when Armageddon is, but we would like to see fast action on that issue. The Sustainability Commission also put forward to Council a recommendation on tiny houses, and I'd like to thank others in the community, notably Sue Walling and David Wade. I think they're with the housing group We Can as well. Some of the issues tonight I don't think are uncollegial with Eugene residents. We just have some different perspectives on some of the issues. And in that regard, the same letter said that while, this is the letter, March 3rd, from Sustainability Commission to Council, that while facilitating needed changes, the city should also sustain and support those characteristics that residents consider the most essential to their neighborhood's livability, like trees and natural features, historic and architectural character, etc. Etc. probably has a lot of things in it. But the neighborhood associations are not against change. And I heard at the Housing Policy Board a comment that neighborhood groups just want to kill change. We live in the neighborhoods, so we want our neighborhoods protected, and we want to have smart change and to have, if not refinement plans, then neighborhoods looked at individually. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Todd Boyle, followed by Sue Wolin.
Todd Boyle, I'm in Alan Zelenka's ward there. I was at the Neighborhood Association meeting last week when they voted to co-sign that letter. And first I'd just like to clear the air that they don't represent me. There were 4 board members of the Amazon Neighborhood Association and a couple others at the meeting. And this is too important to just rely on the neighborhood associations. The Seattle, for example, separated their neighborhood councils from any official links with the city in 2016 because of their excessive power that they were wielding over land use progress and allowing greater density in Seattle. It's kind of an out-of-town issue, but it's something that we should consider here if neighborhood associations claim to represent the members of the neighborhood. So when I moved to Amazon neighborhood, I got stapled to my deed a plot map that was drawn in 1910, and it shows 180 properties. And if you go on all the way down to 24th in the neighborhood, there's about 500 properties there that are almost all less than 7,500 square feet. And 7,500 square feet is the limit for SDUs in our neighborhood. So there's no SDUs being permitted in our neighborhood. I've read in the press that something like 1 and sometimes 4 SDUs are permitted in Eugene in a year's time, and that is a system that's not working. We're not permitting SDUs, and we're not in compliance with the state, the intent of 1051. I mean, that's just my observation. But anyway, I am here not because I want to build an SDU and get rent, which just as a kind of a cheat sheet, the code, translation for what neighborhood associations want to have be heard over is to what extent the homeowners who want to have an SDU and collect rent from the landless versus the homeowners who don't want to have anybody, who don't want to let their neighbors build an SDU and collect rent from the landless. But who's not in any of the discussion is the landless. The students who are in housing, they're not here. They don't vote in our ward for some reason. And I hear their call. I was homeless for years. I know what it's like to be homeless, and I still feel that way. And when I see so many people needing space for a tiny house, I want to let them have a tiny house. And if you would let me subdivide my lot, then I'll carve off 2 pieces of land that are 2,500 square feet, and people can build tiny houses on those lots. I don't want to be a landlord. I don't like that relationship. I don't think it's good for society. I don't want to live in a bourgeois society that we live in. I want to have more of the low-income people right in our neighborhoods, and I think that they enrich our lives. And I think that's what we need to have a healthy and sustainable culture. All the people who don't make money, the musicians, poets, and all these people, and also just people who just don't want to join the corporate economy and make lots of money. I would rather have a city where everybody doesn't have to go down and make $60,000, $70,000 a year. I think that's a dangerous city to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Wolling, followed by Phyllis Hockley.
Hi, my name is Sue Walling. I live at 108 High Street in the downtown neighborhood in Ward 7, which I think is still in Oregon. It's hard to be sure about that last part because, well, last year the Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 1051, and cities around the state have been working to try to make sure that all single-family homes in their communities are allowed to build SDUs. But here in Eugene, we're not doing that. We're talking about making a few little trivial tweaks to the code and then having a community discussion about ADUs. I'm starting to feel a little bit like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Toto, I don't think we're in Oregon anymore. Senate Bill 1051's ADU provision is not too complicated. It says that cities like Eugene, quote, shall allow in areas zoned for detached single-family dwellings the development of at least one accessory dwelling unit for each detached single-family dwelling, subject to reasonable local regulations related to siting and design. That's really pretty straightforward. But just in case there was any confusion, last month the Department of Land Conservation and Development sent out a clarifying memo that spells out exactly how to implement Senate Bill 1051 and specifically calls out some of the barriers to SDUs that are included in Eugene's current R1 code. For instance, on lot size minimums, the DLCD says, quote, local governments should not mandate a minimum lot size for ADUs. An ADU could be developed on any legal lot or parcel as long as it met the required setbacks and lot coverage limits. On owner occupancy, DLCD says, quote, owner occupancy requirements in which the property owner is required to live on the property in either the primary or accessory dwelling unit are difficult to enforce and not recommended. On parking, DLCD says, it is recommended that jurisdictions not include an off-street parking requirement in their ADU standards. And it goes on to say that if there's a shortage of parking, you can do a residential parking zone, like we have around the university. But perhaps the most important words of DLCD's guidance were those that were echoed by Representative Fahey when she spoke to you last week, namely that the purpose of Senate Bill 1051 is to create more housing in Oregon by removing barriers to development. We should fully implement Senate Bill 1051 along the lines outlined by DLCD, not only because it's the law, but because we have a housing crisis that affects more people with every day we sit around talking about it. SDUs are not the solution to the housing crisis, but they're a first tiny little step. It's neighbors working within their own neighborhoods on some renovations that will create a few more places for people to live. We should let them do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Hockley, followed by Eliza Kaczynski.
Phyllis Hockley, resident of Eugene in Ward 7. I'm a member of Churchwomen United of Lane County, and we have 4 priorities given to us by the National Churchwomen United. Priority 2 states, it relates to hunger and to poverty and says, as women of faith, we are called to shelter the homeless and feed the poor. I thought about that this morning. I live on the edge of Sladden Park in Whitaker. And when the city found that they didn't have enough money to open the park anymore in Sladden Park, I volunteered to do it. So every morning I trot over and open the bathroom. This morning, I ran over and it was a little windy and cold, and I was running back to get to my warm spot. And I passed a woman sitting under a tree. Now, she was sitting there, and she had this big plastic holding it over her head, trying to keep dry, and it was windy, so it was going like this. And I thought, wow, I bet she wishes she could run back to where it was warm. And then I got thinking, you know, if State Senate Bill 1051 was in being, maybe with her SSI check, she could go and live in one of those little houses and be able to run back when it got too wet. Our Church Women United board was talking about it at our board meeting this morning. And we are urging action on this bill, and as soon as possible. They feel that inaction, delays with unnecessary studies, staff lacking this priority for work, will only mean more suffering for those struggling to find affordable housing. The faith community sees the suffering. We pray that our elected officials do the right thing. Trust us. This is a cry for compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Eliza Kaczynski, followed by Ron Bevert.
Good evening. My name is Eliza Kaczynski, and I'm a resident of Ward 1, living in the Jefferson West Side neighborhood. We Can, the group that I'm a part of, has already sent written comments related to this topic, asking that owner occupancy requirements and lot size minimums for SDUs be removed. You have that in writing, so tonight I want to take a minute to explain why I keep spending my evenings showing up here. Eugene is facing a housing crisis. It's a crisis of affordability. It's a crisis of supply. It's a crisis of choice. For decades, Eugene has followed the standard development patterns of America, outlawing or making difficult housing and neighborhood types that used to be common, and creating a built environment that is mostly only livable for the most advantaged among us. It isn't equitable. It isn't sustainable. The patterns need to change, or things are just going to get worse. It's going to get worse for my coworkers. It's going to get worse for my friends, for all of those who are hoping to make Eugene their home for the future. I've been told that Eugene is a progressive city, that we look for creative solutions to problems. Eugene should be at the forefront of finding creative solutions to this crisis, but we aren't. Every time a suggestion comes up, there's a proposal for more talk, more process, no action. Every council meeting that I've watched, and I've watched a lot of them, where an issue related to land use comes up, council votes to uphold or strengthen the patterns that have created this inequality. Now, removing lot size minimums and owner occupancy requirements from our SDU code is not going to solve our housing crisis on its own. The impact is going to be minimal, but it's the most straightforward first step. The base question of should Eugene be following the state law shouldn't be hard. I'm here because it's a symbol. It's a sign that this council, this city, is going to stop pushing off the hard questions to let LUBA decide, or waiting for the perfect public process to provide all the answers. That it's going to take the housing crisis seriously. That it's going to look out not just for the existing homeowners, but for the renters and future homeowners who want to make Eugene their home. I understand and appreciate the action that you took last week to move forward the discussion regarding barriers to housing in Eugene. But I also want to know that this time it's going to be different. If we decide to ignore the state mandates regarding SDUs, that's more of the same. I keep coming to these meetings hoping that council will act. Please make the tough decisions to help us solve this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Bevert, followed by Lori Hauber, sorry.
Ron Bevert, live in Ward 2, and I'm the board secretary of the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association. Eugene presently complies with Senate Bill 1051. If our goal is to increase density in Eugene, we need to build more dense housing in R2, R3, and R4 zones, not make legal adding 1 SDU per building site in those zones. Proponents of extensive changes to the R1 code conflate increased density with affordability. Affordability has not resulted in cities like Portland and Seattle, where the densification of residential neighborhoods has taken place. Instead, neighborhood livability has been degraded. Eugene decision makers need to embrace the reality that fully including neighborhood residents in discussions about neighborhoods may be the magic charm to get it right regarding planning. In discussing expeditiously providing the 18,500 housing units needed by households earning below $25,000 per year, we need to include all points of view and put all possible options on the table, such as examining available space in all residential zones, increasing mixed-use zones, changing zoning in the industrial corridor, and expanding the UGB in order to make the best possible decisions. Eugene does not need to follow planning fads that have already failed in other cities. Working with the public has a much greater chance of finding solutions than fighting over poorly conceived ideas. Imposing one-size-fits-all thinking on residential neighborhoods will not work. There are good reasons for maintaining the qualities that make neighborhoods desirable, such as lot size, setbacks, site coverage, solar access, gardens, flowers, trees, and other issues of concern to R1 residents. Many people value their yards. It is not appropriate for we know best scolds to dictate to others their belief that yards should be covered by housing. Eugene is growing, but we do not need to aim toward destroying the qualities of Eugene that we presently enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Hauber, followed by Seth Sadowski.
Good evening, everyone. I live in Ward 1 in the friendly neighborhood area, and I'm here to speak to you tonight about ADUs as they relate to places of worship. But first, I want to thank all of you for your commitment to these issues and for listening to all voices and all perspectives. It's greatly appreciated. As you've heard, there's a gap in the code that we are seeking to, when I say we, that I'm referring to First Congregational Church and other places of worship. There's a gap we're seeking to fix. And by fixing that gap, places of worship will be able to play a role, not solve the problem, but play a role in addressing the crisis we're facing, particularly as it relates to families and households transitioning from homelessness to a more stable housing environment. And that is, places of worship can do 1, places of worship can do 3, but they can't have 2 dwelling units in R1 areas. That's the gap. And how does this connect to the topic tonight? Well, first, what is envisioned are small structures similar, SDU in type. And so when SB 1051, when the discussion started percolating, our church thought, oh, here's the answer. If they can eliminate the owner occupancy requirement, we could do 2 SDUs. Although then, as we looked at the code more closely, we realized, no, not so fast. There were several other changes that would need to be made in order to make it conform to places of worship. So that is why we support the recommendation by the Planning Commission, because their solution is far simpler than what we, those of us on our housing committee at our church, thought first envisioned. So this is much cleaner. It puts it in the special limitations land use on table 9741, I think, or 9740. Second point, SB 1051, as some of you probably are aware, has a particular provision specific to places of worship, Section 8 for cities. And this grants places of worship the right to have housing, the ability to build affordable housing on church property, separate from the house of worship. And that was effective as of July 1. And now the specifics are vague, and you can come call me or talk to me about the specific details of that. However, the intent is...
Thank you. Seth Sadowski, followed by Molly Bradley.
I'm Seth Sadowski. I live in Ward 2 in the Southeast neighborhood, though, like the vast majority of my neighbors, I had no opportunity to have any input on the document that claims to represent the Southeast neighborhood. I'm also part of the Walkable Eugene Citizens Advisory Network, We Can, your stated boogeyman of some of the people who spoke before me. I'm here tonight simply to urge you to make it easier to build secondary dwelling units, as are all the people that you see wearing these stickers. I don't know how well you can see that, and I believe they ran out, so probably more of the people here are here to support secondary dwelling units. Scarcely a day goes by when we do not hear another news article, alarming statistic, or sad individual story related to the lack of housing availability in our community. Just yesterday, the Register Guard reported that Lane County's home inventory is at a record low. However, it is rare that you have an obvious, simple step in front of you to make things a little bit better. Problems of housing availability and affordability are rampant across Oregon, not just in Eugene, which is why the state legislature passed SB 1051 last year, stating that all single-family homes in cities in Oregon should be able to add an accessory dwelling unit. The staff proposal under consideration does not meet that standard. Proposing a small technical fix to which zones may have SDUs ignores the facts that we require owner occupancy for a single-family home to have an SDU and require relatively large lot size minimums that are not design and siting requirements. Owner occupancy rules assume that renters are somehow less desirable neighbors than those of us lucky enough to afford to own our own homes. They're also hard to enforce and make financing more complicated, even if you don't plan on renting. Lot size minimums are not needed. We already have size and setback rules for various zones, which should be sufficient. The staff proposal in front of you was written before DLCD guidance was available and was proposed to be a phase 1 to the minimum required by law, with some nebulous phase 2 to happen later. This might meet the letter of the state law. I'm not certain it does, but it clearly does not meet the spirit of the law to allow any single-family home to add an SDU by July 1st, and does not help to address our housing availability crisis. I urge you to consider for a moment Springfield, which has waived some SDC charges to encourage SDUs, as they provide housing with very little impact on our infrastructure. Is it right that Springfield is leading while Eugene is dragging its feet? SDUs will not solve our housing crisis. I doubt there will be more than a few dozen each year, but they will solve the crisis for a few people. We obviously need to take additional steps, but taking action to make them easier to build will show that this council is interested in action and not only talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly Bradley, followed by Barbara Prentice.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Molly Bradley. I reside in Ward 3, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Oregon, here tonight to speak on behalf of the student organization Live Move. It's Live Move's mission to promote healthy, sustainable communities by integrating transportation and livability through collaboration, education, research, and outreach. We are speaking in support for increasing the number of zones where SDUs are permitted in Eugene because the benefits of additional affordable housing types align with the goals and objectives for livability that Live Move stands for. The zoning amendments under consideration tonight are testing the city's commitment to improving the livability of our neighborhoods and enhancing the quality of life for its residents. Approval of these amendments will not only add value to existing properties in the city, but increase their capacity so they can best serve the community.
As students at the university, we know firsthand the struggles of finding available housing and then finding affordable housing. We know that this struggle is not only felt by students, but by the community as a whole. Allowing SDCs in more residential zones will provide more members of our community with the option of finding housing that's appropriate for their needs and their budget. We realize that zoning is a crucial tool for designing cities, but the current restrictions create barriers to reaching our goals and becoming an inclusive, unique, and affordable city that provides a high quality of life for its residents. The city now has an opportunity to move towards being a more equitable city and providing more affordable housing options. From the perspective of a student organization primarily composed of planning students, Live Move is always looking towards the future to see how we can better design cities to accommodate what we see as a future need. As active members of the Eugene community, we understand the need for more affordable housing options, and we all know that there are many members in our community from varying demographics and with varying lifestyles, and neither a single-family dwelling nor a multifamily apartment complex would be suitable to meet their needs. This is the case for students, retirees that want to downsize, and young professionals that are just starting out and can't afford their first starter home. And many more would benefit from having the option of living in an SDU. Live Move believes the more housing choices a city or a neighborhood has, just like the more transportation options a city has, the more attractive it is to live in. And SDUs are an affordable housing type that will better suit the needs and lifestyles of our community, which is why we ask you to take this small action to address the issue of affordable housing and allow SDUs to exist in more residential neighborhoods. Thank you for your attention tonight and for considering this issue from the perspective of a student group who has been very active in shaping the community over the last few years.
Thank you. Barbara Prentice, followed by Paula Stout.
Hi, my name is Barbara Prentice, and I live in Greg Evans' ward. Besides being a raging granny, I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and we recently put together some materials on the housing availability and affordability. These were mostly taken from the Register Guard's study over this past year about homelessness and housing. A housing crisis in much of the United States in general, and Oregon in particular, is gaining momentum because housing is scarce and prices are too high for a large number of homeowners and renters. The basic reasons for Oregon's housing troubles is that the state has underbuilt its housing supply by 155,000 units over the last 15 years and would have to build 30,000 units per year for 20 years to catch up with the demand. Recently, Oregon has only built between 17,000 and 20,000 houses per year. Oregon has become the third most unaffordable rental market in the country, according to Habitat for Humanity, with 55% of renters falling into the cost-burdened category. They say that at least one parent works in almost 70% of poor families with children, but they don't make enough to cover food, rent, utilities, and other necessities, particularly if they're hit with an unexpected drop in income or increase in costs. I am very well aware that ADUs are not a solution to our housing crisis, but they are a step forward. And as the gentleman just mentioned, Springfield is moving ahead with them, and they are changing some codes, and I think that we need to do the same. You know, I respect the neighborhood associations who want to have this be a broad topic, and it needs to be in a bigger sense. But while we're doing that, while we're looking, and this is including the CET, while we're involved in looking at all these other options, ADUs are a very small one that we could go ahead with, and pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Paula Stout, followed by Babs Sullivan.
Hi, I'm Paula Stout. I'm a member of Ward 2. I'd like to thank a number of you for really being involved in this issue. Betty, I'd like to thank you for your work with Nightingale. I think it's improved my neighborhood having the Conestogas. Tonight I want to talk to you about being a member of First Congregational Church, and I want to talk to you about some dialogue I've had recently with children living in shelter and with their parents. Because I think what we forget is, as we're speaking tonight, there are children sleeping in cars. There are children sleeping in tents. There are children camping. There are children, if they're lucky, that are in shelter. And we forget how much they yearn for housing, to be home again. So these are some comments made by kids at a local shelter. What do you miss about having a house? And the number one topic at this table of kids was having sleepovers. Having friends over, having parties where you kind of all got together and did your hair, but you just hung out. One little girl getting another goldfish. If she had a home, she'd have a goldfish again. Being able to just plop down on the sofa when I get home. Another father who was working said being able to take a shower when I get home. Another kid said, and I don't know how he got away with this, but jumping on my bed. A mother singing my son to sleep. She was living in a shelter where they put up sheets kind of like between to be walls. Another parent having a moment to read in the bathroom. Another mother giving, and she named a child, a bath. And the child perked up and said, yeah, I like bubbles in the tub. And another mother having houseplants. And so I'm going to ask you to really think about moving this along because there are kids and families yearning for a place to call home. I know First Congregational has been waiting now for, it seems like, at least 2 years. There's a good working relationship there with Paul Neville. We're already well-versed in housing. We have the shelter through Family Place every year. So I'm hoping we can move this along. Thank you.
Thank you. Babs Sullivan, followed by David Hazen.
I'm Babs Sullivan, Eugene, Ward 1. I'm going to read a letter that Dan Bryant, who cannot be here tonight, wrote. Mayor Venice and members of the Eugene City Council, I call upon you to support the implementation of Senate Bill 1051, and in particular, the provision for allowing churches to build affordable housing on their property. I already know of at least 2 churches ready to do this, and am certain there will be more. The possibility of building affordable housing is a natural fit for the mission of most any congregation that seeks to serve people in need. From the work I do both at First Christian Church and with Square One Villages, I know of countless individuals who could afford to pay for their own housing if there was affordable housing available. But outside the great projects built by St. Vincent de Paul, Homes for Good, and Cornerstone, such housing is virtually non-existent, and the waiting list for those that do exist is years if you can get on a waiting list. Things like Dusk to Dawn, the rest stops, car camping, and Opportunity Village are all innovative and a model for other communities, but they are only stopgaps that provide a temporary fix until we get a real solution to our housing crisis. Allowing accessory dwelling units to be built on church property for affordable housing purposes would be a real solution that could become another model for other communities. I urge you to approve the inclusion of low-income housing as an approved use for property on houses of worship. Sincerely, Dan Bryant, Minister, First Christian Church, Eugene, excuse me, and Executive Director, Square One Villages.
Thank you. David Hazen, followed by Ruth and Rini.
My name's David Hazen. I live in Betty Taylor's Ward 2, and I'm here speaking on behalf of First Congregational Church and other churches who also support our desire to have secondary dwelling units on their property. The first is from Reverend Dr. Lauren Bostwick, the senior pastor of Central Presbyterian Church. My own congregation has a strong interest and heritage of being involved in meeting the need for housing across a broad spectrum. We help build with other Presbyterian churches Rainbow Village, a low-income housing project, Cascade Manor, a senior housing continuing care facility, 8 Habitat houses in Eugene and Springfield in the last 20 years, and K14, a student housing project at 14th and Kincaid. We have also been involved in the Interfaith Family Shelter and Egan Warming Centers for many years. While we currently do not have room on our campus to build affordable housing, we support our sister congregations of all faiths who do. And from Tom Dodd, pastor at United Lutheran Church, I am glad to say that our congregation has been involved with building of Opportunity Village, several Habitat for Humanity homes, and the homeless car camping program almost from the beginning. The church, the United Lutheran Church, owns a vacant lot on the corner of 22nd Avenue and Jefferson Street. In the past, we have been in conversation first with St. Vincent de Paul and then NEDCO about building a duplex or triplex on the lot, which could then be used for low-income housing. I think it may be possible, if regulations were reduced, that our congregation could help in this small way to reduce the burden of housing for a family or two. It also seems to me that our congregation is not alone in wanting to be part of the response to the need of greater affordable housing in our community. And now finally, a letter that was signed by several pastors, and this is just part of it. We write to you as a team of local churches seeking to collaborate to create more affordable housing units and mobilize other churches to do the same. We urge you to adopt the Planning Commission's recommendations to allow places of worship to have 2 dwelling units on their property exclusively for low-income housing, signed by Pastors Ryan Green and Julie O'Hara, First Church of the Nazarene, Pastor Ben Cross, First Baptist Church of Eugene, Pastor Steve Buss, One Hope Executive Director, Pastor Ruth Ann Rinnie, Unleashed Community Church, Jessica Elwell, and 2 more.
Thank you. Ruth Ann Rinnie, followed by Deborah Jeffries.
Hello, members of the council and mayor. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to speak. I'll keep it brief. I'm part of the collaboration of churches. We have about 100 churches together in a network, and we're all getting really excited about maybe addressing this affordable housing crisis and creating more affordable housing. And wow, when we heard about this proposal that would put a couple of secondary dwelling units on church property, it just felt like a move of God. And we just felt like, wow, this is the way that maybe God is using churches to just get in there and help fight the fight, help these people, because it's not only about putting walls around them, but it's about putting relationships around them. And so I just want to really encourage you on behalf of this network, myself, my church, that we would love to see this proposal put in place, and we would love to just be part of that team that's helping to put a nice house around a family and giving them relationships to be with too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Deborah Jeffries, followed by Gwen Burkhardt.
Deborah Jeffries, Ward 5. My testimony is a little bit more specific than what people are talking about from personal experience. Last December, my mom, age 97, moved in with Rick and I, and not due to her health issues, but because her 1,100 square foot 2-bedroom, 2-bath cottage was sold. The plan was to replicate as closely as possible a cottage on our almost 2-acre R1 parcel, connecting this cottage to the garage. She likes her independence. Her home is not our home is not wheelchair accessible, but should she need one in the future. The location was to give her a northwest view of the landscape that she could enjoy. To my surprise, the city code does not permit the design at this side of the property for 2 reasons. The garage that we have is not attached by city standards to the house. It's connected by a 6-foot wide concrete walkway that's covered with a shingled enclosed roof carrying electrical service from the garage to the house. Therefore, the house is an accessory building and the code doesn't allow an SDU attached to a garage. The second is it's 1,100 square feet, and apparently that's too large on a 2-acre parcel. Again, a reminder, this cottage, if we had built it and attached it to our house, not 40 feet from where we're proposing to put it, if it was attached to the house, it would be fully permitted. What I'm asking is, I've had very good meetings with city staff, both land use and permitting. They're apologetic because there is no avenue for them to offer an exception, a variance, whatever the heck you guys call these things. And what I'm asking is, in the process of you considering what you're considering right now, that you also include or consider to include something about allowing some latitude of staff, wiggle room, to be able to provide something like this. There is no neighborhood around us. The neighborhood is our golf course. That's the view we wanted to give my mom. There is no impact to anybody. And as I said, it's almost 2 acres. So just keep that in mind when you're coming up with whatever it is, your approval. Okay? Because the code says, my understanding is, the approval is to be subject to reasonable regulations related to siting and design. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Gwen Burkhardt, followed by Michael Fifield.
Hi, I'm Gwen Burkhardt. I live in Ward 1, and I also live in one of the neighborhood association neighborhoods. And as a few other speakers have said, I just want to make the point that they do not speak for me. We all have different opinions, and we all should respect each other's opinions. But as an individual, I would like to put forward my own thoughts. SB 1051 took effect in August of last year. Prior to that, there was a great deal of discussion, I believe, over Envision Eugene in 2012 about housing. So my point being that this is not something that came upon us suddenly, that requires a sudden decision. There has been plenty of time and plenty of discussion about these issues. So we now have a rapidly approaching deadline of July 1st. And my point is that I believe we need to move forward on this, that there has been time for community engagement, that it has been held on various levels over a number of years. And to be truly inclusive, it's important to remember that there are many diverse voices that need to be heard and acknowledged, whether it's individual citizens and also the diverse organizations that we have in Eugene. All of us, I'm sure, have the intention, even those I don't necessarily agree with, have the intention of having the best quality of life for the community of Eugene and the city of Eugene. So it's kind of disheartening to see when it becomes an us against them thing. But anyway, that's the only point I wanted to make about that. We're not reinventing the wheel here. There have been, historically in Eugene, there have been missing middle type housing. There have been secondary dwelling units up until the middle of the 20th century. So there is plenty of research. There's a lot of data. We have good examples of what works and what doesn't work.
And I think when it comes to the point of, of regulating siting and design, that's the time when we'll have the discussions over what is going to be viable for Eugene and what is going to enhance the community and the neighborhoods of Eugene rather than be detrimental. So I feel that for the purpose of the discussion today and for what is facing you and the decisions you need to make today or now, it's time to move on. You know, we're past the point where Eugene can be leading in this issue, and it's time for us to start to catch up because this has been accomplished in cities and communities all over Oregon and all over the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Fifield, followed by Jenna Fribley.
Good evening. I'm Michael Fifield. I reside in Ward 3. I'm an architect, certified planner. I'm a professor of architecture at the University of Oregon, where I'm the director of the Housing Specialization Program. I'm speaking as an individual tonight. I'm also here to speak in favor, in general, of a variety of housing options, including SDUs. The majority of my professional and academic experience has been in housing. Currently, I'm one of the architects doing pro bono work on Emerald Village, Eugene. We're responsible, each of us, for the design, the construction, and the cost of each of those individual houses. Prior to that, many years ago, about 11 years ago, the city of Eugene hired me to look at SDUs in the city of Eugene. And I have a copy of the report that we did, which is titled The Role of Accessory Dwelling Units in Achieving the City of Eugene's Vision for Compact Growth. There is a digital copy on the City of Eugene's website that you could all look at. And I would suggest, if you haven't looked at it, that you might take a glance at it. I would like to just mention a few of the things in here. One of the reasons that the city asked, I was hired along with my colleague Brooke Mueller through my firm, and the city asked us to look at accessory dwelling units or secondary dwelling units, primarily because at that time, 11 years ago, the city didn't have much other than some prescriptive setback requirements and size requirements. It didn't say anything why SDUs were important. So part of our research was to look at other cities. So we looked at a variety of places: Hillsborough, Springfield, Tacoma, Santa Cruz, Vancouver, Washington. And each of them had very specific ideas of why SDUs were important, including aging in place, compatibility of a variety of things, affordability, neighborhood stability. And so that was really some of the important things that we were looking at. In addition to that, we should note that we had statistics from 2003 that the households with a single person in them had increased to 26% of all household types. And there were more women living alone than men living alone. And SDUs would really help in that. And just finally, what I'd like to mention is that one of our recommendations in this is the city should develop principles and design guidelines before anything is actually looked at in terms of prescriptive standards. There wasn't enough money at the time to do that, but I would encourage you to do that in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you. Jenna Fribley, followed by Tiffany Edwards.
I would just like to start by thanking you, counselors and staff, for your time, energy, and dedication to this community. My name is Jenna Fribley. I'm actually a resident of Springfield, but I cross the bridge a lot. I'm a local architect, a local realtor, a U of O faculty member, and a member of the Housing Policy Board. From all of these perspectives, addressing the shortage of viable housing in our community is one of the top priorities, and it is apparent by the many letters of testimony you have received from these groups and others. Tonight, I would like to give my personal support for all code amendments that make it easier to build secondary dwelling units in all relevant zones and at places of worship. I would like to urge the council to direct the commission to jump into phase 2 review as soon as possible
not only to meet the requirements of SB 1051, but to recognize and respond to the urgency of the housing shortage in our community. I would also like to point out that that is not just a low-income housing issue, but it's also a market rate housing issue, and it's an issue of housing choice, options, and availability at all income levels and phases in life. I would also like to encourage council to consider an amnesty period for owners of existing non-compliant and/or non-permitted SDUs to legitimize the units that they have built in the past, often because of the code hurdles. Finally, I hope this is the first step in reviewing the code to increase opportunities for building all types of missing middle housing, including cottage clusters, row houses, and other typologies that are lacking in our community. We need more housing, all types of housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Edwards, followed by Tom Happy.
Mayor Vinnis and members of City Council, my name is Tiffany Edwards. I reside in Ward 7 and I'm a neighbor of Santa Clara. But I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. The Eugene Chamber represents approximately 1,200 businesses in Eugene, and sustainable workforce housing has been both a priority and an issue for which we have dedicated a great deal of time and attention in working to improve. Eugene's current housing crisis is of great concern to the Eugene Chamber and its members. Providing for greater housing choices, more affordable housing options, and increasing housing availability are all objectives that we must continue to work to improve. It was in response to this housing crisis that the legislature passed Senate Bill 1051 to provide a tool for communities to deploy by removing barriers to construction of secondary or accessory dwelling units and incentivizing new construction of this type of low and moderate income housing. These are units that would provide a tremendous mutual benefit to both homeowners and renters in our community at a cost almost entirely supported by the private market. However, as this policy decision has already been made by the legislature, the city is now tasked with the how rather than the if as it relates to implementation of SDUs. The Eugene Chamber shares in the vision of many other proponents here tonight advocating for the removal of barriers to developing SDUs and encourages removing restrictive requirements from the policy. We should also request that the city consider providing tools to incentivize the construction of SDUs, such as waiving or reducing systems development charges in existing areas of infill. Furthermore, while a two-phase approach has been proposed, it only makes sense if the policy can fully comply with the state law by the mandated implementation date of July 1st. Failure to comply would put the city at risk for costly litigation at taxpayers' expense, which can be avoided by an expeditious process. Public input is important to this process, and feedback should be considered as it relates to the task at hand, which is specific to reasonable regulations relating to siting and design standards. The Eugene Chamber appreciates your consideration on this matter and looks forward to ongoing community engagement as we work collectively to remove barriers to affordability on this critical type of housing to support a valuable segment of Eugene's population and workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Happy, followed by Richie Weinman.
Good evening. I'm Tom Happy. I live in Ward 1, and I'm very nervous, so I'll be honest about that. Although you almost put me to sleep with the long wait I had. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who's here, council, mayor, all the people who've come to testify. I have a lot of friends in the audience here, and it's great to see democracy in action. I also want to say that I sympathize, feels like I'm not being heard well here.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Sympathize with virtually everything I've heard. And I got a script here I'm going to read from, but I just wanted to kind of have that preamble, but also say that sometimes real simple solutions to problems create a lot of unintended consequences, and I've had to live with some pretty extreme examples of that. And I would ask anybody in the audience who thinks we can have quick, simple answers, how many would want to live in the West University neighborhood? Probably not many. All right, I'm going to read my script. My guess is that most people in this room agree on these basics, that Eugene has a housing shortage, a housing affordability problem, and that action to address both issues is necessary. However, the devil is always in the details. Using a blunt instrument to solve all problems can have disastrous results. Most problems are better solved with a nuanced approach. I forgot to mention that I'm speaking mainly to process. In the case at hand, the notion of making rapid and sweeping changes to residential code to accommodate one type of housing is ill-advised. Rather than a top-down approach, I encourage a bottom-up process of neighborhood engagement. Our neighborhood association, which is Jefferson Westside Neighbors, has proven that citizen-led code revision processes can produce a better result. Legendary planning activist Jane Jacobs knew this. She believed that local residents and business people know instinctively which improvements will bring positive change. She knew that conflict arises when distant experts develop schemes in which local wisdom has not been accessed at the beginning of the process. She knew that a genuine public process with public input from the very beginning would arrive at the right point. She said that little plans are more appropriate than big plans, calling big plans boring and inflexible because they're the product of too few minds. She added that when the plans are very big, the mistakes can be very big also. She also said, I resented that I had to stop and devote myself to fighting what was basically an absurdity that had been foisted on me and my neighbors. I fear this is where Eugene is heading. Let's join together for mutual benefit and greater good. Let's get this right by abiding by Goal 1 of Senate Bill 100, which is citizen involvement. Let's hit reset and engage all citizens via our neighborhood associations. We need dialogue, partnership, and open thinking, not facilitated input, unilateral governance, and conventional paradigms. Thank you.
Thank you. Richie Weinman, followed by Matt McRae.
Thought I would never come to another city council. I'm Richie Weinman. I live at 55 West 31st Avenue, and my wife, Linda Garber, and I have lived there for 32 years. We own the house. The severe housing shortage in our community is hardest on those who can least afford it, and we need more options for our workforce, our aging relatives, our neighbors who are disabled, really everybody. SDUs are one of the many levers we need to pull, and I strongly support more options. The proposal in front of you, however, gets it wrong by 180 degrees. SDUs need to be allowed and encouraged in R1, and not so much in R2, R3, and R4, where they are actually counterproductive. Most importantly, Eugene should eliminate the discriminatory and outdated owner occupancy requirement. It's really just a form of redlining. The greatest responsibility for an elected official is to represent and advocate for the community's needs, not just respond to the loudest, the most connected, or the most affluent. Most people don't even know there's an issue here to testify about. You need to look out for their needs. Decisions are almost always made and influenced by those of us who are homeowners. I'm guessing most of you, if not all of you are, and I bet almost everybody in this room is a homeowner, and yet half of our community are renters. They are good people. The owner occupancy requirement to construct an STU is based on a false belief that renters are second-class citizens and not responsible. I can't think of another explanation for such discrimination. It is certainly not based on any scientific study or any local data, I guarantee you, okay? LCD sent out a directive to eliminate this discriminatory practice as part of compliance with SB 1051, yet it remains in the code and isn't part of the Phase 1 recommendation. I don't understand why. It's an easy amendment that you can make, and it makes a difference. It is the low-hanging fruit. And Portland, Springfield, and other cities already allow it. I don't understand why not Eugene. I'm just going to add that on my street, which I've lived in for 32 years, the houses that are the least maintained are owner-occupied. Okay? They are not renters. I know which ones are which. I've been living there for a long time. So, but I said this was a two-phase proposal. It's worse than no proposal at all. Higher density is already allowed in R2, R3, and R4. If you add one unit there, you're actually defeating your goals of trying to get a lot of housing there, and people are investing in one unit, and then they're going to be stuck with that unit because it's not going to be financially feasible to tear it down and build something more later. You really want higher density in those zones, not lower density. Don't be afraid of SDUs in R1. While density has increased, household size has decreased. Think about all the number of schools that have closed. They used to have 6, 7 people in a family. Now they got 1 or 2 people in a family. The people might not want to have somebody invited into their home and live in their home as a renter, but they're happy to have somebody living on their property. Take action soon on this. Some people here want to slow walk this. This is not necessary. Take action, please.
Thank you. Matt McRae, followed by Karin Knudsen.
Hi, my name's Matt McCrae. I live at 2584 Friendly Street. I'm in Councilor Semple's ward. Thank you for your service, Councilor Semple. I think Richie actually said everything that I want to say. I might make a couple side points. First and foremost, the housing crisis, you all know about it. There are tools in front of us to help deal with it. And so I encourage you to adopt the Phase 1 proposal that's in front of you, including the allowances for housing in places of worship, and then move right on to Phase 2. And specifically within that, address the owner occupancy requirement. Richie said really beautifully that it just doesn't fit us. It doesn't work here. It's not serving the broader community. So, and then the minimum lot size, similarly, is not a siting and design issue, as the state mentions. So please, let's get rid of the minimum lot size requirement. And then, it's my job, because I'm the climate guy, to come up here and remind you all that, when we add SDUs in neighborhoods, that we end up with climate solutions as well. Smaller homes use less energy, and fitting in more people where there are already services provided allow more people to get around without having to drive to meet their regular needs. So it will help address that issue as well. Finally, I'll just bring up a point. Bill Astrogren said that there are some 30,000 sites in town that are big enough to accommodate SDUs. And we talked about it really briefly. He said he got that from the planning staff. If that's true, if we have 30,000 sites where SDUs could happen, we all should be asking, well, then why aren't they happening? So I just encourage you all as council to ask your staff, what are the barriers? Why aren't people adopting these if it's really, if there are that many spaces available? Thank you all for your time and for listening to all this tonight.
Thank you. Karin Knudsen, followed by Dennis Robeson.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you very much for your stamina and the seriousness with which you're addressing this issue. We all appreciate it. Karin Knudsen, AIA Ward 3 resident, and speaking on behalf of Better Housing Together this evening. Now 35 organizations strong, Better Housing Together and our partners are working to improve the affordability, diversity, and supply of quality, walkable, age-friendly housing in this community. Some of our partners are here with us this evening. We know that you share these concerns, and it's why we are urging you to take clear action and move forward with SB 1051. SB 1051 is one example of how Eugene can take clear action that supports greater housing affordability and diversity. We want you to make every effort to comply directly and fully with this new state law by July 1st of 2018, and to actively encourage more small and affordable units like SDUs. We support efforts to remove barriers to quality infill and to actively encourage missing middle and more affordable housing types. SB 1051 is one step in the effort to accomplish those goals. And I just want to say, and I'll repeat this again at the end, that partial compliance with a state law is not compliance with a state law. We need to think about where we're going as a community and how we can get there together, Better Housing Together, an open door opportunity to engage in developing solutions and working on these issues. To accomplish all of these goals that we have, we would encourage you to swiftly use the DLCD's guide that is now available. This was just released in March. It wasn't available to you in January when you considered the staff language and your direction that went back to Planning Commission. It's a concise, excellent resource. It is for a state resource to explain how to comply with a state law. We would encourage you to use this and move us forward quickly and cost effectively into full compliance. We're asking for your clear action because Eugene is in desperate need of units like SDUs, smaller and more affordable units. Our community is experiencing a housing crisis, and these are the smallest unit of infill development by the smallest possible developer, the homeowner, the neighbor who owns that property. These neighbors don't just want more housing diversity and affordability in their neighborhoods, they want it on their site. They want it in their own backyard. It's a yes, and we want for you to acknowledge that and help those individuals to move forward. This is also key because leveraging the capacity of private homeowners, property owners, is critical to responding to the housing crisis. It's incredibly important when we have 6 in 10 renters cost-burdened, 3 in 10 severely cost-burdened, meaning they're spending more than 50% of their income on housing. And I'm guessing that you all know this because the city has a policy in place already to waive SDCs for SDUs that are rented as affordable housing. We want you to think more like that. Look for solutions, look for leverage, bring more people into this conversation, and move forward quickly, because partially complying with a state law that is designed to encourage housing affordability is not compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Robeson. Okay, Josh Newman. Josh, and then after Josh, Jean Tate.
You're up, Josh.
You're up. Yeah, he didn't show up, so.
I brilliantly wrote stuff down here, and now I'm out of power. So I'm going to be brief. I think you've heard a lot, and it's all good stuff. So I'm just going to underscore and represent a perspective. First, thank you all, and thank the Planning Commission and staff for their work on SB 1051. But Eugene is having a housing crisis, and it's also a housing choice crisis. The Oregon legislature passed SB 1051 to address this crisis, and it's the intent of the legislation is very clearly to allow at least one SDU everywhere that single-family dwellings are allowed, subject to reasonable local regulations related to siting and design. Owner occupancy requirements and lot size minimums are not that. So we need to fully implement SB 1051. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Tate, followed by Emily Fox.
My name is Jean Tate. I live in Ward 1, and I would like first to do something probably not allowed, but I would like to ask you all if you'd like to stand up and stretch while I speak. That's not a problem. I speak with some bona fides, both on affordable housing and on unaffordable housing. My affordable housing, thank you, Betty. We older people like to get a stretch, yes. I was president of an organization that built about 260 units while I was running it of affordable housing. It was not easy. I disagree with the neighborhood people who talked about process. We started the process to build Woodleaf Village at Donald and Fox Hollow in 1992. It took me 6 years to get through that neighborhood to build this very nice 60-unit project at Donald and Fox Hollow. We should not have to wait 6 years to do the SDUs that you're talking about. They will meet a need, they are needed, they are proper, they will make great places for people to live, and I second what Richie said, what the guy in the blue shirt said, and what the woman in the red shirt said. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Fox, followed by Bill Close.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Emily Fox, and I'm in Ward 2. There have been a few misconceptions. Neighborhood associations are for helping solve this. We recognize there's a housing problem. We are not dragging our feet. We are asking that we be part of the process. I heard Mayor Vinnis refer to better housing as the way to do public input, but I don't feel that this organization represents myself or many in the neighborhood, because there are so many developers and architects, real estate, and people who will profit from densification. As I said, I am not opposed to SDUs. I see that there's a place and they're good. I just think more data is needed to come up with a good plan. As Tom Happy said, the devil's in the details. I'd like to suggest that neighborhood associations be utilized to assist planning and use opportunity siting to determine placement for larger development, and that neighborhoods can have a say in future regulations as to lot size and height and design. I understand that the planning department has already written up code language for phase 2. You're being encouraged to pass phase 1 quickly, move on to phase 2. but I'm afraid there will be poor process with little neighborhood involvement. And the neighborhood associations are written into city rules 3746 in 1983 that we're supposed to be helping you in matters concerning the neighborhoods. And we represent thousands of people. I also question how building a lot of SDUs is really going to solve the affordable housing problem. Everybody's been asking tonight for this, and it'll help a little bit. But on a city planning chart, it said we need 13,500 dwelling units where the rent is $625 a month or less. The new prices of apartments and SDUs seem to be twice this amount, and the cost of new construction is becoming prohibitive, and often if tearing down houses is involved, it could be more affordable just for someone to live in a rundown house. I lived in a rundown house for 15 years, and finally I could afford to buy it, and now I'm so happy in my home. I hope I live there till I die. And I suggest that densification happens, first of all, north of 13th Street between, I don't know, maybe Lincoln and Patterson around the city core, so that all neighborhoods in Eugene don't end up looking like the university neighborhood, which had virtually little planning because it was determined by what developers wanted to do, and there were no barriers, and they just went ahead and built. We need some guidelines, contrary to what many people have said tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Close, followed by Ed McMahon.
I'm Bill Close. My qualifications include supporting the Raging Grannies, having worked on the Woodleaf project longer ago than I can remember, and also representing the home builders on housing matters. This council presides over a zoning code that's fundamentally hostile to housing availability and affordability. Most of the amendments you pass to that zoning code further reduce availability and affordability. The legislature knows that. They stepped in with a baby step to help you out. He said, here's your homework assignment. You have to do X by July 1st, 2018. This body set a scope of work with staff. It said, shoot for about 20%. And that's where you're at right now. You're not going to be able to get the homework assignment done by July 1st. There are no excuses and there are no extensions. Here's another way of thinking of this. The legislature, by statute, created a right, a statutory right, for every owner of a single-family dwelling to have a secondary dwelling unit. They call them accessory dwelling units in Salem. We call them secondary dwelling units down here because we're special. But that is a statutory right that's going to stick to every owner of a single-family dwelling on July 1st. Where are you going to be on July 2nd when you have an ordinance that solves 20% of the problem? What are you going to say to the 80%ers when they show up and apply for a building permit for that secondary dwelling unit? I know what your staff's going to say. Sorry, that's not allowed under our code. And that guy's going to say, but I have a statutory right. And the message at that point is going to be, sue us. Somebody's going to do that. There are an awful lot of people who are in that group of 80%ers. I'm just picking 80%. Might be 85. Doesn't matter. But those are important classes of people. It includes whole neighborhoods that are just too darn special to have SDUs. It includes owners of certain shaped lots who aren't allowed to have SDUs. It includes owners of certain size lots who aren't allowed to have SDUs. It includes people who want to have SDUs but can't be an owner-occupant of more than one house that they own. How many thousands of people are in that category? And includes some neighborhoods that have zoning regulations that are just so complex that nobody can really understand them. You have to ask the resident that wrote the zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed McMahon, followed by Angie Manzano.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ed McMahon. I'm the Executive Director of the Home Builders Association of Lane County, located at 1065 River Road. You have our written testimony, and it's getting late, so I'm going to keep this short. The one thing that's going to fix our current housing crisis is more front doors. Senate Bill 1051 is a step toward that. So simply, let's comply by July. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie Manzano, followed by Dennis Cassidy.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Angie Marzano, and I'm a small business owner here in Eugene. I live in the Cal Young neighborhood, Ward 5. I am here tonight for sustainable, walkable neighborhoods, and along with Better Housing Together, champion for well-designed infilled redevelopment that reduces our impact on the climate and keeps our community accessible and economically thriving. I encourage the council to consider full compliance of SB 1051 and reduce SDCs that make this type of development accessible and affordable and move the needle on providing critical housing options. From what we've heard earlier, there has been adequate public process. We need action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Cassidy, followed by Arthur Hart.
Good evening. Dennis Cassidy, Ward 2. I'd like to emphasize everything that Ed McMahon said, and as well as the majority of the people here. And I would like to suggest that you follow the example of Springfield in temporarily waiving these systems development charges for ADUs and SDUs. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur Hart, followed by Kip Lohr.
Hello, I'm Arthur Hart, a Eugene resident of Ward 1, a Jefferson West Side neighbor. I've come tonight as an R1 homeowner. I've actively sought to build an SDU for about 5 years now, and I don't have one. I have the money, the manpower, the know-how, but it's difficult. There's a lot of barriers in the code. Presently, I would say that R1 restrictions are my only reasonable barrier to building an SDU. SDUs may or may not fix affordable housing issues by themselves, but probably not. They could be part of the solution, but for me, an SDU is a home by which I could help family live on their own for a little longer with some support. Maybe if I live long enough that I could live on my own with some support. I'm going to say yes in my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Kip Lohr, followed by Dylan Lamar.
My name is Kip Lohr. I live in Ward 1. Madam Mayor, council folk. First of all, I want to say I'm really impressed by your stamina and your attention level. I've been sitting here as long as you have tonight, and you're really listening, and I really appreciate that, and it's been inspiring to see that. I would say, can we agree that there's a housing crisis in Eugene? Can we all shake our heads, yes, up and down? Can we also agree that SB 1051's intention is to help us along with that issue, right? The intention is there. I've heard several people mention compliance. To me, it's not an issue of compliance. I am a real estate agent that owns a company in Bend, Oregon for the last 10 years. I moved here 2.5 years ago and opened up an office here. And I got to see Bend's process start in 2016. They didn't need the state to help them get a process started. And in February of 2016, they made several changes to their codes and their SDC fees and their application fees that resulted in pretty profound change in Bend. In 2013, there were only 37 permits issued in Bend. In 2016, when they passed the measures that they decided upon, they had 255. Last year, they had 263. Guess how many we had last year here in Eugene? Does anybody know? Anybody know? 4. In the last 3 years, the city of Eugene has had a total of 6. The year before last, we had 0. To me, this is less of an issue of whether or not we should do this. Obviously, there are already approved uses for SDUs here. What are we getting wrong here? And what we need is leadership from you folks, right? And even if we just were to have this conversation based on what's already approved, without getting into any more arguments about adding more zones that are approved for this, what are we getting wrong as a community in promoting these as an answer to a part of the puzzle? And so I would encourage you to start looking for those answers and follow some of the other cities just in our own state that have come up with some of the answers to that question. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Dylan Lamar, followed by Joel Sadowski.
Hi, my name's Dylan Lamar. I'm an architect, developer, and landlord. I live in Ward 1. Demand for housing in Eugene is growing faster than supply, and climate change impacts suggest this trend will not relent in our lifetimes. If we support equity and housing opportunity, we should address this crisis with wholehearted action, supplying a large volume of new housing opportunities as soon as possible. Unfortunately, Eugene's current response to this crisis looks pretty half-hearted. Please immediately implement SB 1051 with the guidance of DLCD. Let the churches do what they're going to do really well, and let's get on with the important work of supplying an abundance of housing opportunities throughout our city, especially homeownership opportunity. While we await meaningful action, our R1 zoning regulations, which arose in a sprawl-oriented context with a mentality of socioeconomic segregation, still blanket our city. We've decided not to sprawl, but we still have sprawl-based zoning. By contrast, the much-loved streetcar suburbs of Inner Portland, for example, developed at a time when single and multifamily housing were not segregated. This resulted in neighborhoods with diverse housing options, both highly livable and achieving a density that supports walkability. A century later, our R1 zoning laws continue to take us down the opposite path, segregating us economically and spreading us too thinly to support walkable neighborhood centers. A serious response to this crisis would address such a misaligned chokehold on our housing supply. Livability is often placed in opposition to any increase in housing density, despite historic examples to the contrary. We need to be wiser than this. Besides, livability in a growing number of Eugene neighborhoods is already out of reach for a growing majority of our population. Current half-hearted efforts will surrender them fully to only the very wealthy. SDUs are the lowest hanging fruit in supplying legal forms of new housing in R1 zones. Their creation should be widely enabled, and we should go further. They should be allowed on their own partitioned lots so they can be owned, not just rented. The millennial generation is burdened with unprecedented student debt and met with escalating ratios of home price to income level. If narrow interest continues to succeed in suppressing new housing only into multifamily zones, they will condemn an unprecedented level of younger generations to a lifetime of rental housing. I see this in my friends. This is irresponsible. All of us should have a decent chance at home ownership, not just those who got here first or those who can pay in cash. Please provide wholehearted leadership and address this housing crisis for the benefit of all Eugenians. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel Sadowski, followed by Dennis Lees.
Okay, I am Joel Sadowski, and I live in Ward 2, and I attend South Eugene High School, and I have noticed, I wouldn't say firsthand, but I've noticed the lack of housing whenever I go downtown and see people having to live in the streets. And I feel that allowing SDUs or ADUs, depending on what you call them, is a very obvious step it's a very obvious step forward. And I would also like to remind all of you to take what the neighborhood associations say with a grain of salt, since mine has stopped doing social media outreach. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Lees, followed by John Hoops.
Thank you. Bear with me in case I have to look at my notes too much. I have an awful time reading my own writing, so bear with me if I stumble. I want to get a little bit of background first, if you don't mind. Back in the 1960s, I started my career as a associate minister in 2 different churches. After that, I became a social worker in Child Protective Services for many years, and then director of the emergency response team in Child Protective Services. And then I was a therapist in private practice for some years. And finally, I was director of a large mental health program, a county mental health program and treatment program. I've seen more and more times than I can count the difference in outcomes for programs that catch a problem early or help people early as opposed to later intervention. So much better is accomplished if you catch the problem at an early stage. I also was co-founder about 25 years ago of an organization called Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. The purpose of the organization was to raise money and develop programs for early intervention with preschool children from disadvantaged neighborhoods. We did many studies over the years that showed, without a doubt, that there's a huge disadvantage for those children who had early intervention before at the preschool age compared to those who didn't, and in terms of how their life went after that, how much intervention there was with the correction systems. It showed without a doubt that early intervention really does work. The earlier the better. The money saved by early intervention and the lives impacted, the effect on the community is often drastic, and the difficulty that you get when you don't have early intervention, but instead late intervention, which often involves much more involvement with police department and such. We did one study that showed that for every $1 spent in prevention, early intervention, saves $7 in the correction system down the way. So if nothing else, it's a way to save money, to intervene early in whatever kind of a program that you're talking about. So I believe that this housing program is definitely would fall in the category of early intervention, trying to help folks at as early a stage as we can to help themselves and address their problem or their situation and their needs at a very early stage so that later on they can lead productive lives and society can benefit as well from those productive lives that they can now live. Our church, United Church of Christ, First Congregational, really looks forward to participating in this program. So I certainly look forward to that, and it looks like we might have a brighter light down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Hoops, followed by Roman Anderson.
Mayor and councilors, thank you so much for being here. My name is John Hoops, and I live in Allen's Ward. Allen, are we 3? I lose count. Thank you for that.
Rhymes with Z.
3Z. I might keep it now. Thank you for that. So I've been in Eugene for about 25 years, moved here from Wisconsin, grew up in Green Bay, lived in Madison. I'm a realtor, and a lot of people who talk about the greed of real estate will go, ooh, he's one of those. But interestingly enough, I was lucky enough to be the president of the local association in 2009. I'm sorry, in 2007. I was state president in 2012, and currently I'm a director to the National Association. Who cares about any of that? The neat piece of that is it gives me a 30,000-foot view. The housing catastrophe that is going on is not a Eugene problem. It's not an Oregon problem. It is a national problem. People have said that, well, ADUs won't solve the issue. No, but I think they're a part of it. People tonight have said there are thousands of places you can build them, and a gentleman quoted very eloquently there were 4 to 6 applications, and I don't know if any were actually built. So there's something wrong with that equation. There are other communities doing things that we need to look at. The Better Housing Together, I think, is one of the best coalitions that I've heard of in a long time, and I think it's so incredibly important because what we hear from a lot of the neighborhood groups is we need more data and more time. We're out of time. The reason the state stepped forward and said, here's something that you people can do, but by the way, you need to do it by July 1st is, guess what? We didn't get it done. We didn't get ahead of the curve. We're behind the curve like most of the country, like most of the state. But it's really, really, really time as leaders to say, okay, we've got a certain amount of time. We have a certain amount of resources, both information and financial, and we've got to make some hard decisions. Can we talk long enough to make everybody happy? We have to stop doing that. Eugene's done that very, very well for a very long time. That's my opinion, no offense to anyone. But it is time. It is time to move forward and engage people like Gene Tate, who have built some amazingly successful multifamily, higher density housing situations. There's so much available out there. There's so many resources. We need to dig in and make some decisions and move forward on SB 1051. Thank you.
Thank you. Roman Anderson, followed by Janet Bevert.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Roman Anderson, Eugene, Ward 4. Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Eugene is faced with three options: growing out, growing up, or growing in. With the lack of expanding the urban growth boundary, we have chosen not to grow out. With the lack of changing zoning laws, we chose not to grow up. And with the only option left is to be grow in. I'm here today to speak to the council to enact Senate Bill 1051, but to also reduce other regulations and fees. As a local home builder, I'm asked to build SDUs frequently, and not once has anybody ever taken me up on the offer once they understand all the bureaucracy that's involved in that. Most people here have asked, why have we not been building SDUs? The fact is that the SDC fee, System Development Charges, if somebody wants to convert a garage into an SDU, could easily be $20,000 or $25,000. So there's a lot of people out there that want to convert these living spaces into secondary dwelling units, but the market just won't support that. Nevertheless, expanding SDUs is a market-driven plan that costs the city nothing and is in alignment with the Envision Eugene and has broad support. I urge the council to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet Bevert, followed by our final speaker, Madeline Cohen.
Hi, I'm Janet Bevert. I live in Betty's ward, but Emily and Chris are also representatives for Sheena, and I'm the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association co-chair with Ralph. Tonight, I really think a lot of us are in agreement, and it's sort of discouraging when I hear people separating us. Better housing together, what's missing? Together. Neighborhoods, neighborhood associations, R1 people that are affected by this. We can, what's missing? We're not included. Now, tonight, I see this housing options now. Elijah with We Can was handing it out. I asked her, who's this from? She said, ARP. I don't see ARP's name on it. I'm a member of ARP, so I don't even know what this is. But housing options now? Yes, I agree with that. So anyway, I did see the Oregon Department of Land and Conservation and Development guidelines. I read through it. Some of it's debatable, some of it I agree with. But we need to discuss that as neighbors, as property owners. One of the things in there was a statement that said we shouldn't have unclear terms like compatibility. But yet on the last paragraph, they state we have to make sure things are compatible within the neighborhoods and supported for development. Anyway, you could read it, and that sort of took me aback. Like I'm saying, inclusion is what's needed. I was sort of disappointed when I asked some of the people that were handed this sticker, what does it mean? And they said, SDUs can't be built in Eugene. That's untrue. You know, we can't have misinformation. We need to know what's real. We can't have misleading information. Another thing that is discussed is lot size. And I thought with some of the setbacks or the issues that were happening near the university in 2014, you actually re-looked at what you had proposed and had in action with the SDUs. the owner occupancy thing, I feel is very important. If you let go of that, you are going to have developers buying affordable houses, ripping them down, putting two in, not having management. I own rentals. I know my renters. They seriously don't care about the outside of my property. I also, the parking thing, have you talked to police, fire departments, garbage service, street cleaners? Do they want all these cars on the street?
Thank you.
Progressive solution is what I'd like, and that's inclusive.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Madeline Cohen. And it looks like she gave up. She thought she'd never get there. So I just want to thank those of you who survived to the very end. It was a very, I think, helpful and informative conversation. I'm really grateful for the whole array of insights. I have Councillor Clark in the queue. Are there other councillors who wish to speak? Claire. Councillor Zelenka, okay. Claire, okay. Councillor Clark, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. To those, several people said some similar things, and I agree with an awful lot of what was said tonight, too. To those who suggest that some of the big questions around why are we only building 4 and 6 a year? Go back and watch the council meeting that took place last Wednesday. Unfortunately, there was no media coverage of it at all. The Guard didn't write about it. But this council, when it rarely does, unanimously spoke that we're going to take a deeper dive into the why question and focus on affordability and availability and diversity of housing types. And staff's coming back to us with that. And we've already taken that action to say, okay, why is this the case? I, for one, would suggest that, like the builder that just spoke, some of the concerns that I have had and spoken during the CET conversations and during SDC conversations over the last year or two is that we're pricing ourselves out of those kind of affordable options, and that when you look at the number of houses that have been built and the costs from the city to those who build homes, just a few pieces of data. 15, 20 years ago, we were building 700 or 800 houses a year when there were fewer people coming here. Now the average is 200 to 300 new single-family homes a year when we're having twice the growth that we've planned for. We have exploding demand meeting diminishing supply. Never in 30 years have we increased the amount of land that we can build on. We have tripled, if you include some of the things that have been proposed at this table in the last few months, tripled the cost of building new housing in the last 8 years. So some of the whys are readily available, and I'm looking forward to the staff's presentation so we can talk more about them and perhaps get some solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Zelenka.
Yeah, every time I sit through one of these marathons, I'm always impressed by the folks' stamina that stayed at the end, so I applaud you for that. And also the high level and the quality of the presentations and testimony we get always impresses me, especially on something as arcane and technical as SDUs. And then finally, the diversity of opinion. There were 56 opinions on today. Everybody who spoke had a slightly different take on it, but I did hear a lot of agreement on a lot of things. So I think we will get the First Congregational Church issue solved, and so we'll move on that. And I think SDUs are a part of the solution, but they're one of many things. I've often said that there's no silver bullet to affordable housing. There's silver buckshot, and SDUs is one of those buckshot. So what Mike was referring to is the council talked to staff about working on a package of maybe 5 to 6 things that we realistically can do within the next 6 months to move the dial and actually increase the amount of affordable housing. So we're going to be working together on a package of things that includes things about SDUs and CET and code provision streamlining and all sorts of things that we'll look at. But that's the goal, is to come up with a package of things that will move the dial towards more affordable housing.
Thank you. Councilor Saret.
Thank you. It is late, so I'll be very brief. I just want to thank everyone who came to speak and also folks who gave us public comment through email. I was the sole counselor to vote against the restrictions we placed on allowing secondary dwelling units about 3 years ago, so my position isn't a mystery. I didn't support those extreme limitations then, and I don't now. In addition to the proposed recommendations from the Planning Commission, I think we need to remove the owner occupancy requirement and the minimum lot size. This council is comprised of the duly elected officials representing the residents of this city, and we are the ones responsible to implement the requirements of SB 1051. So I encourage my fellow councilors to support taking the actions necessary to bring us into compliance by July 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Council.
Before you close out the meeting, I just want to address two things with you. One would be when you're going to want to close the public hearing officially, and then you'll also want to address the question of the record, because this is a land use proceeding. It's a legislative land use proceeding. You received 2 requests this evening to leave the record open from Mr. Aspergen, and then also I received in writing a request from Mr. Cooper, requesting it, both of them, at least 7 days, if more. This is entirely up to the council whether you want to leave it open and the amount of time you would like to leave it open. It's scheduled for action on May 14th, so there is some time if you wanted to leave it open for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, or you could choose to close it this evening, but we want to address it.
Okay. So we can speak to that. I need to close the hearing, and then we can discuss the record. Yes. This. So I am going to officially close the public hearing so that we can have that conversation. I have Councilor Taylor wanting to be in the queue, and then Councilor Clark.
I move that we leave the record open for 2 weeks.
Second. Okay. Any discussion about that? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're good with that, so we'll leave it open.
So that would be, it would leave the record open till close of business April 30th, just for clarity for the public.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, are we complete? All done? Thank you, and we are done. Thank you very much.